Hi, my name's Chris Gilmour, and I'm the CTO for Axians in the UK. And I'm very, very pleased to be here for the first Axians Technical Conference and to talk to you today about SD WAN and how it's evolved into Secure Access Services Edge. So, quick bit about myself. As I mentioned, CTO for the service provider enterprise business in the UK. I've been in the business for far too long, 20 plus years. I would put 20 years there because I scared myself when I actually worked it out. Working mainly in engineering roles within service providers, and then I moved to Axians in operations as an engineer. Did that for a couple of years, and then I moved through to pre-sales, and I've not really looked back. I really like the combination of technical solution building and engaging customers and that sort of interaction and making sure that I'm trying to work through a solution that fits what they're actually after, rather than picking a technical Rolls Royce, which is a habit that a lot of people tend to have. Eventually, I took over management of the team, and that sort of evolved into the CTO's role I'm in now. I like working with technology to find problems for people I like working with technology to solve problems for people, not making the problems. In terms of skill sets, I'd like to think solutions design and architecture are some of my strength areas. The pre-sales background sort of has a nod to that. And again, identifying and leveraging new technology trends. Part of my job is looking around at what's the next thing, the kind of future, where the market's moving to, what the vendors are telling me, what the analysts are saying. And I track a number of areas, and one of the areas I track, for example, is ONUG. So I saw SD WAN come out of there in 2014. So we've had sort of a capability in Axians in the UK since sort of mid-15 to deal with that. Slightly ahead of the curve. We're now seeing that start to ramp up significantly now, but yes, we were quite early to that particular game. So talking about the SD WAN and SASE, I put together a rough agenda. I want to just kind of cover off some of the market trends in the enterprise world that are driving the adoption of SASE, what it actually is and why do we care, and then a little bit about where it's going to go. So anyone who's been in this industry for longer than 5 minutes will understand that the world is moving. People no longer have all their applications in a data center. It's all moving towards the cloud. That adoption of cloud, either as a dedicated cloud or hybrid cloud, is in turn driving massive change in the networking industry. One of the things coming out of that is SD WAN and a lot of direct to internet and direct to cloud networking. So we're moving away from the legacy systems of old. We're moving to a new, more agile, cloud-based, direct connection model. One thing that hasn't moved on particularly well is network security, because it gives us a lot of challenges. And what I mean by that, when the network and the applications are all sat in your data center, you can in effect build a wall around them, and you can sort of arms around them, hug them and protect them. You have control over the physical applications and the physical tin that they sit on. But security is more than just a firewall. So different threats have been detected over the years that have triggered new inventions and new technologies to try and combat those. So a typical security stack can include IPS, filtering for URLs, antivirus, SSL. Data loss prevention is one that's coming through more and more and more through to the theft of intellectual property. And then DNS security, in fact, and also sandboxing, so you can actually sort of explode open exe files and attachments to see if they're malicious or not. As people have moved more mobile, that's meant there's a whole lot of inbound gateway traffic, and that means there's a whole lot of requirements for things like DDoS and load balancers and your higher level firewalls. Now, all of these are individual appliances. There are vendors who are very, very good in all of these areas. What a next generation firewall is trying to do is to deliver as many of these as possible in a single chassis. And that's sort of been the evolution for most businesses over the last couple of years, is moving from this full application stack here with separate appliances to a converged appliance that can do everything in one. That works again in this environment, but you can see here that in the MPLS world, all traffic comes across to a central data center, and then your internet breakout is there. When you look at the way the market's moving now, with SD WAN increasingly being adopted in a network for branch and for the WAN, with the big component of local internet breakout, you can't replicate this in every single site because A, it wouldn't scale, and B, the financial cost would be ridiculous. Even deploying a next generation firewall in every branch is a real challenge, because one of the knock-on effects to SD WAN that we're starting to see now, because we've been dealing with it long enough, we're starting to see trending information, is that when people break out locally to the internet to access the internet native applications such as Office 365, that bandwidth becomes more valuable. And we typically see the bandwidth increase by almost 200% within as little as 18 months. Now, that is brilliant if you've got SD-WAN, because you can add additional connectivity in. If you're scaling and trying to scope out a next generation firewall for a branch estate, you have to have a line in the sand that you scope to, because if you plan too far in the future and build too much future capability in, it becomes a very expensive appliance for that day, at that time. So physical next generation firewalls have had that limitation for the last sort of 12 to 18 months now, where they're almost as soon as you deploy them, they're in a race to find that capacity before they basically need to be upgraded, and that constant upgrade cycle is getting very expensive. So increasingly, what we're looking at now is pushing the security to the cloud and pushing as much security into the cloud as possible, because then we can use the elastic nature of the cloud to scale that without having to scale a physical appliance. And it's about removing those bottlenecks from the enterprise architecture as much as humanly possible. And this is where SASE has come in. So SASE is, I'll be very clear, it's a term, it's a concept. It is not a thing. There is no one thing you can point at in the market and go, that's SASE. There are a lot of technology vendors who claim to have SASE, but they will all have claims based on their own interpretation of the way that it has been described by Gartner. Much like SD-WAN means many different things to many different people, and increasingly to the vendors. And there are a wide range of vendors now who claim to have an SD-WAN offering, and their actual offering wildly differs. SASE is exactly the same. The core converged kind of offering is generally around an intelligent application aware edge. Now, we're moving more and more to SD-WAN, but that doesn't have to be the only option. SD-WAN has been latched on by most of the vendors because that happens to be a nice building block for them to put an appliance in and then extend out into the cloud. But it's not the only option. It's going to be the most visible option and the most widely adopted option. But when you're looking at people working from home, for example, the ability to actually connect in and then access this secure gateway and all of the security concepts in the cloud has to be as effective as hooking into your branch network and then using their internet breakout. So that's the first key piece. Then we're looking at a secure web gateway. This is where you're looking to enforce your corporate policy. This is about looking at how you filter the traffic and make sure you've got some actual control over applications. You're bringing in elements of cloud access security broker, which sits between the cloud users and the actual applications, monitors the applications and the activity, and enforces policy there to try and block things like malware. Firewall as a service, this typically is layer 7 application level security, because in the cloud, the network element is less important. But that's a very key piece, but not the only piece. And then you've got zero trust network access. And this is looking at the fact that remote VPN into a network is not going to go away, because there are still applications that you need to access that are sitting on your own network. But the vast majority of applications people are actually accessing now from home or working from wherever are in the cloud. And there is no point in, much like there's no point in going from a branch site over an MPLS link to a data center and then breaking out to the internet there. There's less use for being at home, logging into your work corporate network, transversing that network to then break out to the internet to get your applications there. So zero trust network access is about looking at remote access, but accessing from home directly to the actual applications you need. So all of these are sort of next generation sort of security concepts. Most of them aren't actually new in terms of what they're trying to achieve. It's just a different twist in them. And if you look at the diagram on the right hand side, what you'll see is many of the concepts have been broken out of their kind of stiff boxes of its network or security. And the way Gartner see it is that these are now SASE capabilities. So it's not specifically an a network or a security function. It's a SASE function, and therefore the whole lot are opened out as key functions. So that's a key piece there. And then one of the last pieces I want to kind of cover off is, realistically, true SASE is the ability to run multiple security functions on that data at the same time in multiple engines, and not service chain your services, because that's just going to hit latency and the kind of the capability of the solution as an overall picture. So if we look at those as building blocks and then look at where the market is moving, is there actually a demand for SASE? Well, yes, realistically there are. If you look at the first four listed items on there, most of those are actual appliances that you'd stick into your own data center or your own on-prem. The remaining devices, or the remaining features, are all areas where they've already been moved to the cloud. And in fact, the first four are now on the way to the cloud as well. So this is just showing that there's no common adoption for all those functions. There's no common adoption for all of those features. So there's very few enterprises currently have a full compliant SASE model, because they're not doing all the things that SASE is meant to be doing. But that's down to the individual enterprise, and they're going to adopt the things that they need to adopt to hit their own business cases. And you'll find that as end of life cycles come through and devices get moved out, there'll be more and more adoption of the cloud-based services. But I thought this is a key piece just to show that this is a demand, there is a requirement for these features, and SASE isn't just making something for the sake of it. So if we take that and transpose that onto what some of the offerings are that we're seeing a mix. There are some clear born in the cloud, cloud native, whatever you want to call it, appliance platforms, which use cloud native capabilities in terms of horizontal scaling, and they can just elastically expand to take into consideration any bandwidth boost that you're taking from an end user. So they'll just take as much as you can throw at it, and it just horizontally scales. Some of these are mainly the firewall vendors. What they're typically doing is they're putting a virtual version of their next generation firewall into the cloud, and deploying this across a number of POP sites. It has benefits in that your traditional monitoring and management tools will work as equally on here, but you are then hitting limitations around how it can actually inspect the traffic in a sensible fashion with the latency that you need, and actually get it to that application and return path as quickly as possible. There are some common themes across here. We're looking at URL filtering, IPS, firewalling tends to be in all of them, but you can see very clearly that there is no one vendor who has got the same as any other vendor. They've all got their own take on this, and that is only going to continue. So when you're looking for an SASE partner, you need to look at whether they fit the requirements that you've got as an Axians team working on behalf of your customers. That sort of feeds in nicely to where I think the considerations need to be. If you're looking at a SASE deployment, one of the key things is scale and reachability. If you are a European-only organization, you're going to be very well served with connectivity. You're going to have access to all the cloud connectivity you want, all the AWSs in London, Amsterdam, Frankfurt. Connectivity is not a problem. The latency will probably be okay as well. If you're looking at a global deployment with sites in APAC, LATAM, North America, Africa, Middle East, Far East, even into the Russian Federation, you really need to take this into consideration, because application latency is the killer to anything that's put into the cloud, and one of the biggest blocks to many applications being moved there in the first place. For example, the latency from APAC to Europe can be as much as 300 milliseconds on a native connection. Adding in the cloud security functionality can add more latency to that than the application can support. And so the scale and reachability of the particular platform that you are deciding to work with is a really, really key consideration. Another one is local data protection regulations. We're looking at GDPR in Europe. This is traditionally around where your data is held, so it's where the configuration data is held, but also things like where your logs are exported to. If the logs are held, can they be obfuscated? Can they be directed to a in-country or specific to that customer SIEM platform? So there's a number of things you need to take into consideration there. I've mentioned the cloud native versus the VNF. Typically, VNFs work on smaller scale. VNF and service chaining, I've yet to see work at cloud scale, where you're not introducing latency and also potentially different management platforms for each of those individual VNFs. So cloud native, it should really be the way you're looking forward. Hosted versus public cloud is an interesting one because you just think of cloud as cloud. Realistically, the SASE platforms for the cloud elements need to be hosted somewhere that is hosted neutral. And what I mean by that is if you have your the platform that you're accessing is hosted in AWS and most of your applications are in Azure, then basically you've got traffic going out of one cloud into another cloud to run the security to then trombone traffic backwards and forwards. And when you're looking at things like CASB and software gateway, where the traffic actually has to go through the security appliance, you're looking at building a trombone in the cloud rather than trombone between you and your data center and on the ground. So having a platform that is neutral hosted and not in a particular public cloud gives you that connectivity. There are a couple of platforms whereby what they've done is they host in all the internet exchanges globally, and they've actually done deliberate peering with some of the big cloud SaaS platforms like Office 365, Azure, AWS, so that you can actually optimize that latency to those applications, and the actual hit of going through the SASE platform is mitigated to a certain extent by the fact that they then optimize that back-end connectivity. So cloud native or VNF, but hosted in public cloud is a really, really key piece. One of the main benefits SD-WAN brings to us as a technologist and to a customer themselves is centralized control, that orchestrator in the middle that can control all the policy and push all of the kind of configurations down, and it's a central place to manage, a central place to kind of do all your kind of operational tools and reporting. You realistically want your SASE platform to have that centralized control again. And whilst you can't always have one portal to manage all, that tends to be the ones where it's one vendor who thinks they have an answer to everything. I tend to find the vendors who have an answer to everything are masters of some, not all of those areas, and some of the areas in that overall perspective of portfolio are stronger and weaker than others. So an all-in-one converged platform can work for some environments because of ease of integration, but they're generally not the optimal solution. But programmability and API access is key. There's one cloud security platform I won't name who has no API to create the tunnels that you need to build to connect it to branch estates, be that be SD WAN or just a branch router. So what that means is if you have 100 sites globally, you're going to manually build all 100 of those tunnels. In this day and age, that is ludicrous, but as it stands at the minute, and that was looked at yesterday, there's still no API for that. So you need to look at what is available in terms of programmability. Everyone is moving towards the automation and programmability of the network. APIs are going to rule the world, and the API capability of a security platform should be taken as almost as important as the security capability, because ultimately it's ease of integration. And fundamentally, one of the things you need to consider is that it's not a golden bullet. Not all threats do come north-south from the internet. There are some threats that still propagate east-west. For example, IoT sensors within a campus environment, on-premise instigators of DDoS or malware. So there is still going to be a need for some level of localized security. And one of the reasons why the SD WAN is looking more and more popular is because, as well as the wide area network focus, many SD WAN platforms also have an element of security that they can control from a local perspective, which then gives you that sort of east-west, north-south connectivity and protection. So that's the main considerations you need to take in, when you're looking at SASE. And like I said, there is no such thing as a SASE compliant platform. There are lots of platforms that think they do SASE and will do different interpretations of the Gartner messaging, but Gartner don't build anything. Gartner don't sell anything. They bring out concepts to try and drive the market forwards. I think SASE is a really important development. I think it's taking the cloud model that's coming from applications, the cloud-centric routing and application networking. We're doing SD WAN, and then bringing that security element together to give a kind of converged enterprise the ability to de-risk their applications, their security, and their connectivity. So I think it is the future. I believe it's going to evolve a long way in the future. So just really quickly, it is still evolving. Gartner are still saying this is the big thing. There is no definition of SASE as yet. SD WAN is now starting to define more. So the MEF are doing a lot of work around trying to define what SD WAN means. That doesn't for a second mean that the vendors will listen to it or will work to it, because many have already got a head of steam up and are selling their services out and are not going to then change that to fit into a solution that someone else has put together as a definition. They will work towards it, but I think we're going to be a long way before you see things like a single enterprise using multiple SD-WAN vendors using an API-based portal to then push that configuration out and make it all work together. I can't see that working for the near future. I think that'd be lovely, but I don't see it. SASE as well, it's a concept. It's not actually a defined process yet. I'm sure MEF or some of the other standards agencies will start to work on that, but it's not there yet. As a result, it's going to evolve in line with where the vendors think they need to evolve. So you'll still see a real divergence in what it means. We'll see things like hybrid on-prem and cloud. Like I said, I still think there's a requirement for some level of security on-prem in a branch because of that east-west, and the increasing use of things like IoT is going to mean that there's going to need to be some sort of localized ability to secure users and the estate. Multi-cloud, I'll be interested to see how they're going to handle multi-cloud, where your workloads are sitting in a number of different clouds. If, for example, you have your SASE cloud in AWS, as I mentioned before, that works fine for the AWS hosted traffic. Anything that's in GCP or Azure, you're looking at tromboning that traffic through that to fulfill full compliance. So there'll have to be some sort of federated model whereby you can have models in each of those clouds. It's not there yet. I think that as multi-cloud starts to develop and be adopted more and more in enterprises, it's going to be a really key thing. And then finally, industrial use cases. Again, the kind of hybrid of IT and OT security. A lot of IoT sensors, a lot of automation. I think that there's a real use case for how we can build SASE towards those, and then that would marry into our Actemium cousins and how we can bring together some solutions for them. So that's me. Hopefully it's been interesting. There's a lot of information there. Unfortunately, it's not a deep dive into SASE as such, because that would have to be a deep dive into Cisco's Umbrella or Fortinet or Palo Alto, because there is no SASE as such. So what I've done is I've given you a high-level view. I'm going to be available in the virtual village, so please come to me and ask any questions. If not, I'm on Teams pretty much permanently at the moment, welded to my seat, and I'm also on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. It's been nice talking to you all, and if you keep watching, this stream is going to continue with our next user. So thank you for your watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.